Good afternoon. I'd like to chat with you for a few minutes about a topic I'm calling Pentecostals, missing persons. There's been a shift, if you will, in the fellowship that I've been a part of my entire life. I've watched it change over the years and go through different phases, and certainly we're impacted by the rest of the Christian world. And of course, at one point, the charismatic movement came along, and with different speakers and evangelists and different moves and themes. Uh, I remember when the urgency of the second coming of Christ was something that we were all focused on. It was a big part of our church life and our conversation, and we lived with an expectation that Jesus could come anytime. And then, of course, you over time, people move out of that, and there was a strong evangelistic thrust, and churches were a lot more involved. I mean, I remember the days when bus ministries were a big thing, and so the push was on growing your Sunday school. And so it's gone through different phases and trends, if you will, over the years. What's really interesting and I find fascinating, and mostly I would say this has happened in the last maybe 20 years, but certainly it's accelerated in the last, let's say, 10 years. And that is the slowing down, the stepping away, the handing off of the charismatic expression, uh, very demonstrative worship times. Uh, that reputation that the Pentecostals had over the various decades, starting around the 1900s and all the way through the 1900s up until this 21st century, the Pentecostals had a reputation of being quite expressive, very out there. Of course, the Holy Spirit and the baptism of the Holy Spirit was all a part of our kind of distinctive. It's what made us Pentecostals, and people branded us that way, and we were okay with that branding. But it seems over the last 20 years, as a fellowship, at least here in Canada, we became sophisticated or a little more polished, and those kind of times and days are now few and far between. Finding churches that are in that way anymore, where there are huge altar times, and of course, prayer rooms have sort of gone the way of the dinosaur. I mean, we don't have prayer rooms like we had in the previous 30 or 40 years ago. The new apostolic Reformation group, they seem to have picked up where the Pentecostals have left off. And so much so that when I look at videos showing us their their service times, their worship services, their preaching, even being a Pentecostal who should come at this point with no surprises or shock. Nothing should set me back. I mean, we saw a lot of things growing up in the church, and but it does cause some concern on my part when I look at what is being done, which I have to say, at times in the past, those very same actions seem kind of normal for us. But for some reason, I'm looking at it now, and there's not a depth to it. There's not a seriousness that develops the person spiritually. I've seen a lot of emotionalism in my life, And a lot of it was, uh, it was wonderful to be there, and it was wonderful to experience that as a byproduct, I suppose. But what I was hoping, and I think what we all hoped as Pentecostals growing up and being involved in these very high energy services where lots happened and did happen, and it was quite exciting. The problem was that the development, the residue of what that level of worship or that experience, what we called glory and the presence of God, now hits me as, why didn't it have a deeper impact on the living part of these of our lives? Why didn't it manifest later as exciting and very dynamic evangelism? Why was it that we could experience all those places and things and those moves of the Holy Spirit, and yet it didn't convert into soul winning? Um, to be honest with you, it actually had quite the opposite effect. It became a very closed in club. I think, if I'm right, the statistics on our fellowship, in terms of growth here in Canada, we've basically flatlined for the last 20 plus years. And not only did we flatline in that first part, I think the numbers have actually decreased and are going down. And I'm now watching other uh, organizations, church groups that are coming along and trying to revive and living in that same expressive, excitable, over the top kind of worship and praise times, and I'm watching what's being done. I'm watching what's being said, and it's a little bit awkward, a little bit embarrassing, because we did some of the same things, we made some of the same statements, um, and I saw that it didn't have a deepening uh, to the individual. And it was something that the person wanted to come back, and we've encouraged this, come on back and be filled again. And I struggle with that now, because I'm finding that my walk with the Lord is deeper and more personal than it's ever been in my life. And yet I'm not uh, prone to being involved in that that emotional high that happens. When we go in, let's get up, let's get going, let's get everybody excited, and there's this kind of push to experience more Lord, and not sure what that means anymore. Not sure we got more. Got more excited. We got more. We got louder. We did all kinds of really interesting things, all in the name of worship and praise and all that. But I don't know that it had long lasting value to the spiritual development of us as believers. We've all but lost the generation behind us. And yet we are the ones experiencing these wonderful moves of God that we called them, and had these great altar times, and we lost the generation that followed us. And we haven't been much of a soul winning generation. And now the Pentecostals, I call them missing persons, are not no longer sort of in that role anymore. Very few churches have reached those levels or depths of expression that they were known for in the past. And so it's other groups and networks that are coming on the scene, and they're taking it even further. And sadly, in my opinion, and let's say I love them all, sadly, I don't believe it's truly the working of the Holy Spirit and what we're seeing. I'm seeing a lot of flesh. I'm seeing a lot of man and man's rationale in what makes a good service, and let's get everybody emotionally high and going. And I still believe there can be excitement and joy and true happiness. There can be weeping. There can be true excitement and a thrill to be in the presence of God and to worship God. And but it's a fine line when you leave from that to something that's been manipulated by a leader who um, is bent on revving up the crowd and people, all kinds of terms that I'm coming to question. People soaking and in the river, and we're just. I think these things maybe started out well and true movement of God, true acts of God were in the early church where significant healings and baptisms and um, a lot of miracles happened, and this explosion of missions around the world came out of that revival. But this seeking of uh, let's recapture what we had last weekend, this emotional roller coaster that we ride. The Pentecostals have, to a large degree, given up on that. There's still places that seems to be important to them, but they've calmed down for some reason. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And there's groups like the New Apostolic Reformation group that's picked it up and are taking it much further than where we got to. And as we watch it and observe it, um, sadly, I'm not sure that it's uplifting to the Lord, or it's what is actually being initiated by the Holy Spirit. So I'll just leave that with you. There's a change. We're in an interesting season, and the Pentecostals, for what they were known for and what was their distinctive kind of brand, they are missing persons on the scene. They are Pentecostal by name, but it's not happening a lot. Um, in the true sense of the word, depending on the Holy Spirit, the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and we've become very polished and very sophisticated, and we're behaving ourselves now. And other churches, I think, are we've become much more acceptable, but we're certainly not what we were. And so the Pentecostal movement in Canada, in my opinion, is they are on the missing persons list. So God bless you. Have a great day.